Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Talk Spicy. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Thank you for joining me wherever you are joining me. Rate the show, comment, agree, disagree, but whatever you do, keep it spicy. 5-star ratings are appreciated. And if you're joining me on the YouTube channel, like, subscribe. We always appreciate it. It's interesting, right? Because we live in a world where we want things to be a meritocracy, and yet every time we try to do things based off merit, we have to add some type of, what's the word I'm looking for? We have to add some type of of commerce into it. There has to be some type of financial gain and or windfall from it. And whenever you bring money into a situation, you automatically take away the ability to do it based off merit. At least this is my opinion, obviously. What we see in today's society is that most things start off with good intentions and end in how can we make the most money. And if you ever are going from the how much money can we make, if you ever go from how much money we can make off of it, you're never going to go off of who deserves it the most, right? I mean, just look at us in our own lives. When we choose jobs, most times we don't choose the best job for us. Most times we end up choosing the job that pays us the most money, right? Like, unless the money is, unless the money is close enough where we don't really feel the hit as much as we would if it was big, we pick the job that is going to pay us the most. And that is part of the reason why we end up complaining about our jobs. Because we didn't pick the job based off of what was the best for us. We picked the job based off of which job would pay us the most. And that job that pays us the most comes with issues. There's some things we're not going to like. There's some people we're not going to like. There's some processes that we're not going to be into. There's some things that we're not going to agree with because we sacrificed the perfect job or the job that really would, man, I really would take this job if I didn't have to feed my family. I really would take this job if I didn't have to pay my bills. I really would take this job. I would do this job if money wasn't a factor, right? Where am I going with this? I know. So within the FCS, who has the quintessential tournament in football that I believe the FBS would be smart to emulate, to copy, the FCS, while we're trying to figure out how to get 8 teams and maybe even 16 teams into an FBS tournament, the FCS is out here rolling around with 24 teams involved in their tournament. And within those 24 teams, they play and decide a winner. Okay, so cool. You've got 24 teams. They're playing and they're deciding the winner. That's great. But the problem is, right, because there's obviously a problem. The problem is once money comes into play, right, you eliminate to a certain extent the level of meritocracy that you have within the selection of those 24 teams. So to be full transparency, the FCS used to be 16 teams. 16 teams would make it. They would seed them. They would play to a champion. They expanded the FCS playoffs to 24 teams, which gave the first 8 teams a bye. Now, within that, those first 8 teams were able to accurately set up their home games versus whatever the two teams were in that bracket. Now, there's a part of this that goes, hey, you're welcome, 8 teams that would have never made the FCS playoffs had we not expanded. But then there's also a part of it that goes, well, what goes into those final 8 teams? Because I am 100% confident, right? I'm 100% confident that the top 16 teams, whoever those top 16 seeds were, deserve to be in the FCS playoffs. I'm confident in it. But those final 8, see, that's where the commerce comes in. That's where the money comes in. That's where the I don't really know if you're taking this off merit comes into play. Because Montana made the FCS playoffs. Now, Montana, a perennial power in FCS from the standpoint of they're always good, they're always in the mix. Obviously, nobody's always winning the championship except for North Dakota State, right? So really, it's North Dakota State and everybody else. It's the North Dakota State Invitational Tournament, and every once in a while, somebody else wins it. That's what it's been. But Montana makes the playoffs, and Montana makes the playoffs. And shout out to my boy Jeff Dittman, who just threw this bracket up for me. Appreciate you, Diddy.
Gotcha.
Montana makes the playoffs, even though they're rolling around at 7-4. Now, on its face, you go, well, why not? It's 7-4, right? That's a good record in a really tough. That's a good record in a really tough Big Sky. But here's the problem: they lost to all of the good Big Sky teams. So how good is that 7-4 record if you lost to all the good teams in the Big Sky? Now, you know how I feel about the Missouri Valley Football Conference. It's the best conference, right? But they have, and I'm just going to count them off as I roll through them. They have North Dakota State in here. They have Southeast Missouri State in here. They have North Dakota in here. South Dakota State, right? They've got all of these teams, yet those teams weren't that great. All of those teams weren't that great this year. North Dakota lost 4 games. And guess the games that North Dakota lost? You guessed it, to all of the good teams in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. The Big Sky, they have Weber State, Montana State, Montana, Idaho, and Sacramento State in the fold. So the Big Sky has 5. They have 5. So you're telling me that Idaho, who's 7-4, and Montana, who's 7-4, deserve to get in over, I don't know, Tennessee Martin, who's rolling out here with a 9-2 record and one of the best in their conference? Like, how are these number 2 teams in these other conferences being left aside for the 4th and 5th teams in the Missouri Valley Football Conference in the Big Sky? I know. It's because the conference is better, right? It's the argument that we make about the SEC. But here's the thing. We also have to consider the fact that some of these teams, they pay. What does that mean? Well, you have to bid on the first round. And so a team like Montana, who's going to bid on the first round versus a Southeast Missouri State, they're going to bid. They're going to get a home game versus a team that's had a better record than them in a conference that's actually historically better than the conference that they're in. But because Montana is historic and because we know they're going to pay a hefty price to get this home game, not only does Southeast Missouri have to play on the first week of the FCS playoffs, they don't get that top 8 bye. Not only do they have to play on the first week, but they at 9-2 have to go on the road and play in Montana, one of the more difficult places to play in all of FCS. Doesn't really seem like it's a meritocracy, right? Beyond that, beyond just the ideas of teams that make it and teams that don't make it, Holy Cross had to go undefeated. Holy Cross had to go 11-0 in order to finally get the respect to not have to play in week 1 of the FCS finals. Of the FCS playoffs. They had to go 11-0. Holy Cross has been coming for years, right? But for years they've been getting the crappy selections, and now they had to go undefeated just to get top 8, just to get that bye. That's a hefty thing to do every single year, right? But North Dakota State can lose 2 games and they can still be top 8, losing 2 games? How is that possible? Oh, because it's North Dakota State, right? You've watched North Dakota State play this year. If you're watching me, there's a good chance you watch the FCS. If you're listening to me, there's a good chance that you watch the FCS. So you know that North Dakota State is not that North Dakota State this year. They're good. They're good. Don't get me wrong. They'll punish you. They'll pound you. But they're not really the move. Why? Because Cam Miller's not really that guy. They keep trying to make him that guy. He's not really that guy. I can't believe they have not out-recruited him yet. Whatever. It'll be a matter of time before they'll have a guy back in there that is of that level. And, of course, they'll run roughshod over the FCS again because that's what they do. But right now, they're not the move. Does that mean that North Dakota State cannot win it all? No. Does it mean they deserve a top 8? Does it mean that they deserve a top 8? Right? Sacramento State has been the most dominant FCS team in the FCS this year. They're the 2 seed. Why? Because South Dakota State beat North Dakota State in the regular season. All it takes for a Missouri Valley Football Conference team to be the number 1 seed is to beat North Dakota State. You beat North Dakota State in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, you're probably going to have a top seed. So now South Dakota State is the 1 seed, right? South Dakota State is the 1 seed. They're 10-1. Sacramento State is the 2 seed, right? They're 11-0 in the conference that has the most teams in the FCS playoff. So how does a team who beat all of the teams in their conference that has the most teams in the FCS playoffs not the number 1 overall seed because they didn't beat North Dakota State? Is that really a meritocracy, or is that just based off of biases that we have? So now how can I believe that this is real when I can see the money in play and I can see the bias in play? That's why I firmly believe, and I've been saying this forever, so this isn't something new. I've been saying this for a long time. A lot of the people that I rock with have been saying this for a long time. The SWAC has no business in the FCS. The SWAC is not built to be an FCS conference. It's clear that the FCS doesn't give a damn about these HBCU teams. But I'm not going to say that the SWAC and the MEAC should not be in the FCS, because I believe that the MEAC is a tick below. As a structural conference, I believe that the MEAC is a tick below the SWAC. So I think that the SWAC as an entity, as a whole, should go up to the FBS. They're built on bowl games anyway. And I remember a quote that Coach Prime said. He said, imagine what happens when all of us come to a bowl game, not a bowl game that both of us are playing in, like the Celebration Bowl. We know what we're going to do. But imagine how all of us would rock if Jackson State goes to play against Iowa State in a bowl game. If Florida A&M goes and plays against FAU in a bowl game. Now it's not HBCU against it's not us versus us. It's all of us together, right? Because Florida A&M was 9-2 this year, and they had to watch a 7-4 Idaho and a 7-4 Montana and a 7-4 North Dakota make the FCS playoffs, while they at 9-2, with their only two losses being to North Carolina. What has North Carolina done this year? North Carolina won the ACC Coastal. They'll be playing in the ACC championship game on the 3rd. They'll be playing in the championship game on the 3rd. And yet, that doesn't matter. They played North Carolina with double-digit scholarship players not playing due to eligibility issues because things were messed up at their home offices. They played that team down double-digit scholarship players and was able to hang 20-plus points on North Carolina early. Had it a game at halftime. Made North Carolina have to work for that win. Then they came back less than a week later and got demolished by the best team in the South. The best FCS team in the entire South, Jackson State, who had the most historic year in the history of Jackson State. They're 11-0. They're playing for the SWAC championship. That's why Florida A&M's not there, because Jackson State's undefeated and beat them. That's their only conference loss. They ran off 9 wins in a row, more impressive than last year when they had 9 wins and got in. The entire pool is weaker this year. The entire FCS pool is weaker this year than it was last year when they got in, and they still didn't make it. How can we say it's a meritocracy? They're not even being allowed to do what Holy Cross did. Holy Cross made those first rounds, got beat, until finally they started winning a couple of those first round matchups. Continued to build the brand until finally they're in the top 8. Well, if the HBCU team has to struggle to even get into the dance at 9-2, they're never going to be able to elevate to the levels of the FCS. And you know what the answer is? Oh, well, they have to schedule more teams out of conference. What they're really saying is play the white teams. But they did. They played North Carolina. Like, what else do you want from them? They played North Carolina. They didn't play Colorado State, who's abysmal. They didn't play Colorado State, who's terrible. They didn't play Iowa, who has one of the worst offenses in the history of FBS. They played North Carolina, ACC Coastal champions, playing for an ACC title. If that doesn't trump whatever FBS team these other teams played, then I don't know what does. They didn't play Alabama. So now they're on the outside looking in. Why do you ever even try? Why ever even bother? Clearly, there's something in place that says these teams, we're just excluding them. And the bias and the money makes it impossible for us to rock with you. It makes it impossible for us to believe that everything is on the up and up. So it's time for the SWAC to go. And by the SWAC leaving, that allows the MEAC to now have an automatic bid to the MEAC champion to the FCS playoffs. Because the only reason they don't have an automatic bid is because they've given up the right to the automatic bid because of the Celebration Bowl. But if the SWAC moves to the next level, right, and the MEAC stays, and maybe we shuffle a couple of these teams so that the teams with the infrastructure in the MEAC go to the SWAC, so that you put the best representation forward into the SWAC, and then you put the rest down there until they get their structure, their infrastructure in place. Now they can join the SWAC up there, and now that gives D2 teams who are getting their infrastructure in place a chance to ascend to the FCS. And now you have an ascension from D2 to FCS to FBS for HBCUs to be able to compete against the white teams. Now they get a chance. And will these teams probably beat them early on? Yes. But now that they're playing on equal footing, see how long it takes for them to be able to recruit what's necessary to play. Now that they're not living in bubbles, see how long it takes them to recruit what's necessary to be successful. See, I'm not here to just blow smoke up your glutes about sunshine and rainbows. That's not what I do. What I will tell you is, if the FCS operates in this manner, where you're allowing 7-4 teams, 7-4 Eastern Kentuckys, and 7-4 North Dakotas to make it over 9-2 teams who've run off 9 straight games in a row of winning, then you can't tell me it's on merit. You can't tell me it's on merit. Oh, well, it's because this team beat so many or played against so many ranked opponents. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the things my guys and I talk about all the time is the self-fulfilling prophecy. All of you dummies said that running backs were no longer valuable. You said it so much that front offices started believing you. So what did they do? They started not drafting a bunch of running backs early in the draft. But then that same talent that used to be a first-round draft pick is now going in the third round, but then he's going to a team and performing. And you say, look, he was a third-round pick. That's proof that you don't need to draft him in the first round. No, that's proof that you decided not to draft this first-round pick in the first round, and so you got him in the third round. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So at the beginning of the year, when you do your rankings, when you come out with these preseason rankings that don't mean anything to the game on the field, but means everything to your selection, here's what happens. You rank 8 and 9 of these Missouri Valley Football Conference teams in the first round. In the top 25. Then they play each other and they just start shifting seeds, but they don't fall out of the top 25. So at the end of the year, a team like Eastern Kentucky has played 6 or 7 top 25 teams. What does it really mean? Because they were just the teams that you said were the top 25, and even though they were losing, you weren't getting them out of the top 25 and putting new top 25 teams in. You got too much bias. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that allows you to then add these teams in that you know may have the money, Montana's, or that are in your bias, Missouri Valley Football Conference teams. It's obvious. It's plain and obvious, right? And until we get the money and the bias out of the decision making, we're never going to have a true representation of what the FCS could be. Now, again, at the end of all of this, North Dakota State is probably going to win a bunch more championships than everybody else. Why? Because they're the gold standard in the league. They're the gold standard in the FCS. But since they're not going to the FBS anytime soon because A, nobody wants them, and B, maybe they don't really want to go, they're going to be the gold standard. Give other regions the opportunity to go and shoot for them. Don't kill their dream before they ever even get a dream because you think that a 7-4 team might be more entertaining or will bring in more money. That's not what the sport was supposed to have been built on, right? Don't keep feeding us this amateur athletics BS and then not let the amateurs fight it out. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Talk Spicy. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Do this thing a few times a week. Rate the show, comment, agree, disagree, but whatever you do, keep it spicy. 5-star ratings are appreciated. If you're joining me on the YouTube channel, you know what to do. Like, subscribe. Till next time.